am Daniel Lucas, and welcome to Book 101 Review. Book 101 is all about the books that I read for the last 40 years, and today I have my special guest. Well, sorry, people, but I forgot to introduce, she is Amazon best-selling author, and her new book, The New Old Crafting Your Best Later Life, no other than Miss Erika Andersen.
Thanks, Daniel. It's great to be here. I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Welcome to Book 101, Miss Erika, and can you please introduce more about yourself that I miss?
Yes, 35 years ago, I started a company called Proteus that still exists. It's a consulting and training and coaching firm. And as I started to think about moving away from the business in my late 60s, early 70s, I had already written and published 5 books that did very well about leadership and learning. And I realized that I really wanted to turn my attention to the challenge of getting old well. And so I thought about myself. I interviewed a lot of people. I applied all that I had learned in my work over the last 35 years, coaching executives and organizations. And the result is the new old, crafting your best later life.
Definitely. And thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and wisdom to the world, Miss Erica. What does crafting your best later life mean to you, and how did you develop this concept?
Oh, I love that question. So let me start with the first part of the title. The reason I called the book The New Old is that this is the first time in history, really the first time in history, that most people have lived past 60 or 65. You know,
Yes.
100 years ago, 1 in 20 people was over 65, and now 1 in 6 people is over 65. And what's more, if somebody is a reasonably healthy, non-smoking 65-year-old in most developed countries, they have even odds of living to be 90. And that's never been true in the history of humanity. So suddenly we have this 20 or 30 or 40 years that we've never had before. And we kind of don't know how to take advantage of it. People still think of, most people, many people still think of life as sort of 2 chapters and an epilogue. You know, your first chapter is you grow up, and your second chapter is you start a business, you start a family, you be an adult. And then there's an epilogue where you just, hang around for a couple of years, kind of frail, and then you die. And that epilogue is now a full third chapter. So that's what inspired me to write this book. And I wanted to crack that code for people. So, based on my own experience, what I've learned over all the years of coaching people and all these interviews that I did, I came up with 3 principles that are at the core of the book. So, should I share those with you?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. So, the first principle is be the boss of your life.
Oh,
That's the
wow.
first important thing for our third act, because a lot of times when people retire, when they get old, they start not feeling like the boss of their life. Other people start kind of making decisions for them and assume that they're frail and weak and their brains don't work very well, none of which is true. So, in that part of the book, in the principle of be the boss of your life, I teach the reader a process for envisioning the kind of third act you want. Who do you want to be as an older person, and what kind of life do you want to have? And then also in that part of the book, I talk about, okay, then how do you make a plan to actually make that happen? And then how do you build a crew, in effect, of people around you who will help you, not only family and friends, but medical providers, people who help you, all the people that you need to help you create this life that you want. So that's principle number one. The second principle is master your mindset,
Oh, wow. I like that.
right? Because it
Yes.
turns out that what you the perhaps the single most important factor in how we age is how we think about aging. There was this wonderful study that was done by the Yale School of Public Health starting about 25 years ago. They took hundreds of people between the ages of 50 and 80, and they asked them a series of questions to show how they thought about aging. So, like for instance, there was one question that said, and they were all true false questions. There was one question that said, older people are useless to society. True or false? Right? So if you say true, then you have a really negative attitude about aging,
Yes,
right?
true. Yes.
So then they divided this group of hundreds of people into those that had a more positive mental attitude, mindset about aging, and those who were more negative about it. And then they followed them for over 20 years. And they found out that just having a more positive mindset about aging added 7.6 years to your life. Isn't that amazing?
Amazing indeed.
I mean, it had a bigger effect on longevity than losing weight, lowering your cholesterol, bringing your blood pressure down, all this stuff that people try to do. Whereas this thing that we have complete control of, which is how we think about ourselves and about aging, just shifting that can add years to your life and years to the quality of your life. So, in that part of the book, I teach a process for managing your self talk, for talking to yourself differently about aging. I have a part about how to be more mindful, how to be more present in your own life. And then the final part of that aspect of the book is how to be grateful, how to be more grateful, because it shows that there's a lot of studies that show that being grateful and having a kind of consistent gratitude practice also is great, not only for the quantity of your life, but for the quality of your life. So that's principle number two. And then the third principle is get good at change, because
Mm.
younger people tend to think that older people's lives are kind of stagnant and unchanging. But really, there's a lot of change that happens when you get old. And often it's the most difficult kind of change. It's change that kind of comes at you. You know what I mean? Like somebody you love dies, or you get sick, or your kids move away, or, all these changes. And so, what I realized in my own life and by talking to a lot of people and observing people is that if people can get good at change, can get kind of fluent, good at going through change, that will be hugely powerfully positive for their later lives, for their third act. And so in that part of the book, I teach the process that we came up with in my last book, Change from the Inside Out, about how to go through change, how to make the mindset shift that will help you go through changes. And then I talk about how to modify gracefully. One example that I think will resonate for you is, there may come a time when you need to start playing pickleball instead of tennis. So how do you do that modification gracefully without kicking and screaming and resenting it? And then the final chapter in that part is about how to keep learning, because older people, we tend to have more free time. We're not working 60 hours a week. We're not raising our kids, right? So we have more free time, but a lot of older people think they are no longer capable of learning. And it's just not true. Your brain works just as well as when you were younger. You just have to keep exercising it. Like, for instance, I told you before we started recording that I live in the north of Spain, and I've lived there mostly full time for the last 3 years. And starting when I was about 67, I learned Spanish, and now I'm pretty fluent. I can do everything I need to do. So my old brain is working
Yes.
perfectly fine, in that way. So that's what that chapter is about. I talk to the reader about how to learn well, and then the final chapter is just about connection, because it turns out that one thing that has a really negative impact on people's later lives is that their connections fray. Their friends die, their kids move away, their marriage might break up, or their spouse might die. And people don't know how to make new connections when they get older. So I talk about that. I offer an approach to making new connections, new friends, which we've certainly had to do in Spain. So I'm practicing what I preach in that regard. So
Yes.
that's the book.
And very well said, Miss Erika. Beautifully, beautifully articulated. How can older adults redefine aging to focus on purpose and growth rather than decline?
Ooh, that's a great way to frame it. Well, I like to think that these three principles, be the boss of your life, master your mindset, and good at change, really give people the tools they need to do that. And especially the first chapter in the be the boss of your life part of the book, I propose, I offer, I teach a process for doing exactly that, for crafting a vision for your later life, for your third act. What kind of a person do you want to be as an old person? And what kind of a life do you want to have? What do you want to focus on? For instance, my own personal vision for myself in my 70s is I want to be, and this is the sentence I keep in my mind, full of light, deep, strong, and magical.
Yes.
Right? So that's kind of my north star. I think of that every day. And then the life that I intend to have is about exploration because I have time to discover and support and enjoy myself, the world, and those I love. So those are my two sentences that are framing me forward. And so I give people a process for doing that for themselves. Because a lot of times after people retire, they really feel adrift. They really feel a sense of purposelessness because their work has been such an important part of their lives. So in this book, I help people envision the kind of later life, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, that they want to have. Does that answer the question?
Definitely. Miss Erika, what practical steps can someone take to identify their core values and align them with their later life goals?
Nice. So the book is a kind of workbook. There are lots of activities in it that you can either do in the book or there's an associated website called thenewoldbook.com where all the activities are interactive PDFs. And so I literally do what you just said. I have people think about what's most important to them and envision, kind of do this time machine exercise where they kind of get in a metaphorical time machine and get out 10 years or 15 years later and say, okay, what do I see? What would really make me happy? If I were this kind of a person, if I was having this kind of a life, how would that what would best serve me? What would feel best to me? And then in the following chapter, to your point about goals, I have them make a very a real plan. Okay, so if this is the vision of myself, how do I make sure I become that person? How do I make sure I have that life? And really line it out, the steps that you're going to take to do that. So it's very practical. I think it's a wonderful kind of intersection of inspiration and aspiration with practicality because all of the and you if somebody reads the reviews of it on Amazon, they'll see that a lot of people say that it's very inspiring, but at the same time very practical. Here are the steps that you need to take to create this kind of life for yourself.
Miss Erika, how do you address the challenge of feeling too old to start new pursuits or learn a new skills in later life?
I love that. And I think the main answer to that is in the section about mastering your mindset. Because when someone says, "Oh, I'm too old to do X. I'm too old to move. I'm too old to create a new relationship. I'm too old to start a new pursuit. I'm too old to learn something." That's just what they're telling themselves, right? That's how they're thinking about themselves. And wonderful thing is, we have total power to think differently about ourselves when you like for instance, I'll give you a very practical example. I was um, kind of informally coaching someone a couple of years ago and she said exactly that. She said, "Oh, but it's cool that you're learning Spanish, but I'm way too old to learn a new language. I'd love to learn French," she said, "but I'm way too old to learn a new language." And I said, "Why are you saying that to yourself?" And she said, "Well, I really think it's true." And I said, "But is it? You're sitting here talking to me, a person who's 2 years older than you, and I'm learning Spanish. So what could you say to yourself differently?" And she thought about it for a minute and she said, "Well, I guess I could say, I don't know if I can learn a new language. Maybe I should try." I said, "Yeah, that will completely change your life if you do that." So she, just in that one conversation, she realized she didn't have to believe that internal monologue that was going on inside her head, and she could say something different to herself. And she actually started to learn French. She's has a way to go. It's hard to learn a whole new language, but she's really enjoying it and she's doing it. So a lot of times, the only thing that keeps us from doing something new or interesting or fun or a little risky when we're older is just what that voice in our head is saying to us, and we can change that.
Totally. We can change that. We can do it and stop procrastinating. Do
Yes,
it. Do it.
exactly.
Miss Erica's an best-selling author. What are your short-term and long-term goals?
Well, you've heard what my vision is for myself. And so what my short and long-term goals are to fulfill that, to create a life of exploration and discovery and joy, which I'm doing every day. Our life in Spain is so filled with that. And when we come back to the United States, it's all about being with our kids and grandkids and siblings and doing new things and finding out new stuff. And and I want to be a light in the world. I mean, you heard my vision, to be full of light, deep, strong, magical. That's what I'm working on.
Yes, full of life. Because people, life is too short. Seize your day because, as I said, life is too short. And thank you for that goals, Miss Erica, and looking forward for more success and good luck. And what will be your piece of advice for those people out there who want to be a best-selling author too, like you?
I think I think there are two things. I think that you need to find something that you're really passionate about, that you want to write about. And then you need to either get good at the craft of writing or find people to help you write, because you then have to express the thing that you're passionate about in a way that's compelling for people.
Definitely. And thank you for that advice, Miss Erica. And can you please recommend a book or books that influence your journey?
Oh my gosh, so many. It's hard to
A
hard to
lot.
pick. A lot of fiction books and a lot of nonfiction books. I guess the if I were to pick the nonfiction book, the business book really, that had the biggest impact on me over the years, it would be Jim Collins' Good to Great. A wonderful book. 25 years, 30 years after it was published, I think it's still selling really well. And it's about how companies that are doing okay can become great. And I found that his advice is applicable. I used it a lot when I was working with organizations, but it's also applicable to individual human beings. So it's useful on lots of different levels.
Yes. Thank you for that recommendation, Miss Erica. And what or how does engaging with passions like those discussed by Tony Robbins enhance joy in later life?
I'm not very familiar with Tony Robbins' work, so I'm not sure I'm a good person to ask. But I want to pick up on what you said. I feel like finding joy in life is
Yes.
critically important. And I like to think that the principles I've outlined in this book will help people create later lives of joy and discovery and purpose. So that's my that's that's how I'm trying to contribute to the conversation.
Yes, and thank you for that contribution, Miss Erica. Can you describe a specific exercise or practice for older adults to clarify their vision for their later years?
I can, yeah, I can really take you through the exercise that I use in the book if that would be helpful.
Please do.
Okay. So it's simplified. I start out by saying, okay, what are you solving for? What challenge are you trying to solve for? And it's a really good thing to get clear about. Are you trying to create a life that's joyful? Are you trying to create a life that is connected with the people you love? What so I ask people to start with what we call a how can I question. How can I create a life of joy? How can I create the healthiest life? How can I, whatever is important to you? It's really important to start with that question. My question, interestingly, was how can I become what comes after the butterfly? And the reason that was my question is because I thought of my life, when my kids were growing up and when I was starting my business, that this is my butterfly stage. I'm out of the cocoon, I'm a butterfly. And I realized that this part of my life in my 70s and 80s and hopefully 90s is what comes after the butterfly. Unlike a butterfly, that I had a whole next stage of evolution in me. So that was my starting question. How can I become what comes after the butterfly? But each person creates their own question. It could just be, how can I create a healthy, fulfilling later life? Let's say that's your question. Then you look as objectively as you can at your current life and see what you have going for you and against you relative to that question. So if your question was, how can I create a healthy and fulfilling later life? Then you'd say, okay, what do I have in my life that could help me do that? So my health is good right now. I have a very supportive husband. I live in a place where I can walk a lot. You just list all the things that are good. And then honestly, you list the things that are bad. There's a lot of history of cancer in my family. I don't know where I'm going to live in my 80s. So you just get very objective and balanced. You become a kind of fair witness about your current state. And then from that point, that's when you get in the time machine and envision. And you say, okay, I know where I'm starting from. I know what I'm solving for. In 5 years or 10 years, you can say when I retire or in my 70s or when I turn 80. And then you just get in that time machine and get out and say to yourself, okay, I've solved my question. I have created a healthy and fulfilling later life, given where I'm starting from. What does that look like? And you just either write it down or speak it. Here's what that looks like. Here's what I envision. And then I have people look at what they've written down or listen to what they've spoken and pull out the things that are most important to them, that resonate the most for them about this later life they want to create. And that's how I came to full of light, deep, strong, magical. Those were that was what I pulled out that meant the most to me. And that's how I also pulled out that I have time for exploration to discover and support and enjoy myself, the world, and those I love. So from this time machine exercise where you envision what would it be like in my 70s, you pull out those few things that really resonate deeply for you. And then you have your vision. So in the book, I offer, my example that I shared with you, but then I offer about a half a dozen examples of other people that I've done this process with, just so people can see, that there's a lot of possibilities. But that's how you do it. That's how you envision this later life that you want to have.
Indeed, Miss Erika. And before we wrap up our discussion for today, I'm inviting you to please to listen to my other podcast, people. My other podcast, because my abstract essay is already in fifth season, abstract poetry in second season, and my book 101 review in fifth season too. Food 101 in fifth season as well, Geography 101 in fourth season, and my baby podcast Law 101 and Mental Health 101 Love Letters in third season, and Movie 101 Review and Music 101 in fourth season, and Science 101 and Sex 101 in its first season. Please listen to them wherever you listen your podcast. So, Miss Erica, what is the one key takeaway you hope people gain from the idea of crafting their best later life?
I want to go back to something you said a few minutes ago, which is that we can. I think the most important thing for somebody who's in this part of life, 60s, 70s, 80s, even 90s, you can create the life you want. It's not a fantasy, it's not fake. You can take steps to make sure your life is what you want it to be. And it doesn't, I mean, we all have challenges. Some people have health challenges. There are lots of challenges, but you can create a life of joy and discovery and purpose for as long as you live. You can do that.
You can do it, people. Stop procrastinating and always be positive. Optimistic is the key. Right, Miss Erika?
Optimism is key, and research shows that that's true. Optimism that's grounded in practicality, that is the key.
Miss Erika Andersen, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and wisdom to the world. So can you please invite our listeners to support all your books?
Yes, absolutely. My previous books in order are Growing Great Employees, being strategic, leading so people will follow, be bad first, which is about learning, change from the inside out, and the new old.
Yes, people, let's support Miss Erika Andersen because if you support her, for sure, more and more and more empowering books like this to come. So, Miss Erika, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Daniel. This has been great. I really appreciate it.
And people, please do tune in for our episode with Miss Erika on Abstract Essay. More to come, people. See you soon.